The pyramids. History lesson. Friends, hello. Imagine you're Napoleon Bonaparte. You've just landed in Egypt with your army. A mountain of urgent tasks lies ahead. First, pry Egypt out of British hands. Then build a political career. Crown yourself emperor. Conquer Europe. You feel you're in the very eye of history's storm. No one seems more important than you right now. Perhaps only two figures can rival you: Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great. And then your army, half of it, barefoot French peasants, approaches Cairo. Near a dusty hamlet called Giza, they see the Egyptian pyramids for the first time. Instantly, everything you worried and schemed about shrinks to something small and trivial. These pyramids were built back when your Gallic forebears wore hides, lived in forests, and prayed to who knows what probably sacred oaks. The pyramids have stood for 4,000 years and will likely stand for 4,000 more. They saw Caesar, they saw Alexander, and a countless parade of kings and generals, each convinced he was the leading man of human history. Those kings and generals long ago turned to dust. Only a few are even remembered. The pyramids remain. Napoleon was struck to the core. The spectacle moved him so much that he began his pre-battle speech with, "Soldiers, 40 centuries look down upon you." If we imagine the pyramids truly looking, they would have been utterly indifferent at that moment. You think they hadn't seen a battle in 4,000 years? Anyway, friends, welcome to a new history lesson. Today we'll talk about the pyramids, where they came from, what they mean, how they were built, how they're put together, and about the many wild conspiracy theories woven around them. Let's begin. The first big attempt to find treasure. Let's roll the clock back about 1,000 years before Napoleon. You're a powerful Arab caliph, a local ruler. From your fortress in central Cairo, you can't not see the pyramids. They stab your eyes every day, and to be frank, they annoy you. So you decide to open the biggest of them, the Great Pyramid of Khufu, Cheops. Surely there must be immeasurable riches inside. Gold, silver, gems the size of a human head. Ancient books say that in Roman times, there was an entrance on the northern side, and that it could be opened. So, at the caliph's command, an army of laborers pounds at the pyramid for months. Hammers, sledges, they even bathe the casing stones in vinegar to etch the rock. Finally, by the sound of falling stones somewhere within, the builders realize they've missed by about 5 meters sideways and 10 meters vertically. At last, their tunnel does break into the proper passage, but the original builders, dead for thousands of years, anticipated this scenario. Inside, the Arabs find no treasure at all, only a thick layer of dust. That night, the vizier tosses a jug of gold coins into the pyramid, just enough to pay the workers because it's embarrassing otherwise. People spent months on who knows what. Another 500 years later, one of the caliph's descendants decides to put the pyramid to real use and strips the Great Pyramid of its white casing. With those gleaming blocks, he builds one of Cairo's most beautiful mosques. As for the hole the caliph's men smashed, that's how tourists enter the pyramid to this day. If you've toured Giza, you may well have crawled through that hole yourself. The Giza pyramids, royal tombs built by slaves. The pyramids stunned even the ancient Greeks, to whom they already belonged to a mysterious antiquity. We had no idea when they were built. Our earliest written account is from Herodotus, the father of history, who lived in the 5th century BCE. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, specialists think, was built at least in the 27th century BCE. So Herodotus stood 22 centuries after the pyramids, almost the same distance we stand from Herodotus today. Greeks and Romans traveled to Egypt to gawk at the pyramids, much as we now go to see the Acropolis or the Colosseum. They asked exactly the same things we do. What are these? Who built them? And how? Why? What lies inside? There was no one to ask. The pharaohs were long gone. Egypt was under the Persians. The Egyptians themselves had forgotten much, and the few remaining priests didn't care to share their secrets with tourists. The Pyramid of Khufu made the ancient list of the 7 wonders, and it's the only one still standing. Let's start with the most official, most plausible version. Herodotus is the root of that version. We have nothing older. He says the Egyptians were the most religious people he ever saw, obsessed with piety and the afterlife. According to Herodotus, the pyramids are royal tombs. He adds that Khufu himself was not buried in his pyramid, fearing that the slaves who built it would desecrate his body out of revenge. In fact, unlike the tombs in the Valley of the Kings, mummies are rarely found in the pyramids, and when they are, they're often just fragments. From Herodotus comes the idea that the pyramids were built by slaves. That stuck in historical writing for a long time. The Greeks were slavers and slave traders. It was hard for them to imagine free people voluntarily hauling blocks across the desert. Today, that's no longer the main view. Current research suggests that specialized crews of paid workers built the pyramids, and they were well compensated. But as for the funerary function, yes, most likely the pyramids did serve as tombs. Around them, we find all sorts of death-related structures, nearby temple complexes where mortuary rites were performed. Inside, in some cases, funerary texts listing the deceased's achievements. Still, even for ancient people, and for me, frankly, today, it strains belief. 20 years of nationwide effort to build a grave for one man, even if he's pharaoh, throwing the entire economy behind it? And the pharaoh, mind you, is alive and well during construction, eager for the finish. He tells the architect, "Higher. Don't let my tomb be smaller than my father's. The future will laugh." The architect doesn't just dig a bigger hole or pile a hill with an obelisk on top. He tackles a fiendishly hard engineering problem. So hard that, even now, with all our science and machinery, it's no trivial matter. I'm going to keep taking the layperson's role here, because that's what I am. We have human history and documents. Where documents fail, we have later chronicles and memories. Scholars align these with radiocarbon testing and math models and propose, this is how it probably was. And yet, as a viewer, some things just twist my brain. The Egyptians had no diesel engines, no tower cranes, just hammers, chisels, ropes, drills, and stones. They polished stone with other stones. Try this. Take a big rock in your yard and try to polish it with another rock. Rope in 25 friends. Time how long it takes to get one face as flat as a book cover. Days? Weeks? We have power grinders with diamond grit, and still it's work. Now imagine doing it with rock on rock. I can only imagine the time. Back to Khufu's pyramid. We'll keep returning to it because it's the biggest, most impressive, and most instructive. Its ancient Egyptian name translates to Horizon of Khufu. Pyramids bore poetic, megalomaniacal names: Horizon of Khufu, Shining of Sneferu, Divine Menkaure, and so on. Cheops is the Greek distortion. The pharaoh was Khnum Khufu. The Great Pyramid rises 146 meters. The base is 230 by 230 meters. For millennia, it was the largest man-made object on Earth. It's built of roughly 1.5 million stone blocks, averaging 2.5 tons each. Some are far heavier, like the granite elements of the burial chamber. The heaviest of those is about 30 tons. In total, about 5 million tons of limestone and 8,000 tons of granite. The build, by the common estimate, took 20 years. Given the number of blocks and the complexity, 20 years is very little, vanishingly little, I'd say. I can't even picture the logistics today, in the 21st century. How do hundreds of thousands of people-free masons, plus laborers, move millions of blocks? Historians insist that's how it was. The Egyptians were hyper-organized in logistics and construction, and knew how to do this even then. The pyramid is aligned almost perfectly to the cardinal directions. Built by people who understood engineering, each face is actually split in two. There are 8 faces, each one subtly concave for stability. Before the caliph's men stripped it, the pyramid was clad in white limestone, which made the sides look flush, not stepped. Those casing stones were polished and fitted so closely that gaps were sometimes under a millimeter. At the pinnacle stood a small cap, the pyramidion gilded. Imagine white stone blazing in the sun with a golden tip flashing at the top. Picture the impression on ancient Egyptians. Another detail. Look at photos of the masonry. It's not brick, 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 all the same size. Many blocks are custom cut to interlock, some longer, some shorter, odd shapes to fit tight. Not just logistics, this is a precision production pipeline. No AutoCAD. How did they visualize all this? I don't know. What was ancient Egypt? Even now the pyramids impress us, despite Burj Khalifa, rockets in space, everything. Imagine then, seeing it through the eyes of an illiterate peasant. You live in a hut of mud and palm leaves. You hunt crocodiles for dinner, or they hunt you. And on the horizon, this. No questions remain. The pharaoh is a living god. Pay your taxes, obey the priests. Here's my dissonance. Those same peasants who worship crocodiles and tremble before a god-king also spend 20 years building this architectural masterpiece? That clash is hard to compute. To understand, you need to understand Egypt. The Nile is everything. Anyone who's been to Egypt knows that hasn't changed since Khufu. Life clings to a narrow strip along the river. Beyond lies desert. In the ancient world, the Nile was a jackpot. A huge river water means life and agriculture. Early river civilizations share a type. Scholars call them hydraulic despotisms, where everything revolves around farming and water management. You settle on the bank, dig an irrigation canal, and then live like that for 1,000 years, or 10,000. Egyptians did. The Nile flooded predictably every year until the Aswan High Dam. The flood spread fertile silt across the fields. The climate is warm. Egyptian winter can be 10 to 15 degrees. You can harvest several crops a year. Egypt fed not just itself, but the whole Mediterranean, the ancient world we know. Politics swirled around Egyptian grain roam later, Byzantium too. Under such a system, you prefer nothing to change. Plant, reap, repeat. Generations lived like that. There were wars, invasions, but even those didn't change much. No one wanted to break what worked. New rulers were proclaimed gods, pharaohs, and the bureaucracy kept humming as before. We talked about this in the Cleopatra episode. When the Romans came, they didn't impose Roman administration. The priest said, "Don't explain anything. We'll announce you as pharaoh. The people will understand. The elite will comply. We'll put a gold mask on you. Don't break our systems. Grain will flow to Rome, and you'll be a living deity." The Romans quickly agreed. Thus, for the average Egyptian farmer, nothing changed. The conqueror plugged into an existing interface and ruled through it. An eternal, cyclical anthill and religion is the easiest way to run it. In other ancient states, merchants, soldiers, politicians mattered. In Egypt, the priests ruled. Temple complexes did propaganda and management, agriculture, education, knowledge-keeping. At the top stood the pharaoh, not just absolute monarch and high priest, but simply a living god, not merely adored or feared, though both were true. In the popular mind, he made the fundamental things happen. The sun rose, the Nile flooded. When your life depends on the Nile, you control nothing. Flood? Good life. No flood. Disaster, famine. Religion gives the feeling of control. Why drought? We fed the sacred crocodiles wrong, or botched the rites. Next time, we do it right. The priests may have known perfectly well that crocodile snacks weren't the issue, but why burden the peasants who farmed for 100 generations? They wouldn't grasp the speech anyway. Egyptian religion deserves its own full episode, but a few words are necessary. Why the obsession with pyramids? Egyptians lived in the cycle of the Nile's flood, so their worldview was cyclical. The river rises, the river falls. You plant wheat, it sprouts, you cut the ear and plant again. It's like a mantra. Egyptian religion in brief, central is Osiris, god of fertility and the afterlife. In myth, he is killed, dismembered, and cast into the Nile. But he rises again. Egyptians thus believed in eternal life after death, not only for Osiris, but for themselves. It follows logically. Everything renews. Nature cycles. Man likely doesn't truly end either. There were conditions. Live worthily. Your heart is weighed and so on. But the core was this. The soul needs a preserved body to return to, therefore, make a mummy. The success of your afterlife could hinge on the state of your corpse. So bodies were protected in secure tombs where no one could harm the mummy. Grave goods supplied the needs of the journey. Pharaohs, of course, got treasures. Weapons, chariots, riches, and armies of servants in the form of ushabti figurines. For pharaohs, they built pyramids or underground tombs with secret chambers and false doors to outwit grave robbers. Poorer people were wrapped in cloth and sometimes buried directly in the desert sand. It was likely the desert that inspired mummification. Egypt is dry, rain is rare. Bodies buried in sand, desiccated instead of rotting. That was just the start. Soon, Egyptians became masters of embalming, special priests versed in anatomy, special tools to remove what might decay, special bombs. There were multiple service tiers: economy, comfort, business class. People avoided skimping afterlife quality depended on it. Procedures were timed and ritualized. Which amulet goes where, which words to say. To us, a funeral is respect for the dead. To them, a human life was at stake. Afterlife life, but still life. You ask, did they really believe all this without evidence? Well, today, the super rich like cryonics. People voluntarily climb into deep freeze, hoping that sometime in the far future, science will discover immortality. Conspiracy folks say the Denver airport hides whole rows of freezers with rich people inside. No guarantees. More likely some guy in 2136 sits on the wrong button and cuts the power goodbye forever. Doesn't stop anyone. Mummification, at heart, was ancient cryonics religious, not technical. An Egyptian thought about death constantly, but not morbidly. He hoped for eternity. In that light, a 20-year nationwide project to build the pharaoh's tomb doesn't sound so strange. These were truly great builds, each pyramid a national project. How they built Khufu's pyramid. First, they chose the site. The old necropolis was too crowded for another giant pyramid. They found a fairly flat limestone outcrop ideal. The foundation solved. Materials solved, too. The quarry for core limestone could be right there. They laid out the plan precisely, scratched the markers directly into the bedrock. The discrepancy in side lengths is under 4 centimeters. In height, under 2 centimeters. From the tiny pattern of errors, archaeologists can tell they began on the east side, which is slightly more accurate. They leveled the rock, but left a natural rise in the center and built the pyramid around it. The common myth that it's made of perfectly identical blocks is wrong. The core is full of rough stones of varying size, quarried to the southeast. There was likely a ramp from the quarry to the site, later dismantled. It was still hard work. Lower courses used 3-ton blocks, upper courses around 1 ton. The interior masonry wasn't pretty. They sometimes poured sand into gaps. Recent studies reveal internal voids. The better-cut stones went to the outer skin, laid in courses with slight setbacks. At first they worked from ground level. Later, scaffolds and ramps rose as the pyramid grew. Much of the scaffolding was removed at the end. Some ended up entombed within. The outer masonry has 201 courses. The top dozen or so are missing. Over that went a layer of small stones, and mortar chemistry shows even charcoal in the mix. Then the fine casing, white limestone from the opposite bank of the Nile. We know the exact quarry. In 2013, French archaeologists found the papyrus diary of Merer, a foreman who oversaw transporting the casing stones. They came by boat and were dragged overland. Scholars think the masons laid the casing first and polished it in place, hence the razor-tight fit. But remember, the only way to polish stone then was long, tedious abrasion with harder stone. Imagine the hours. Those papyri were found on the Red Sea coast, where Khufu sent expeditions for copper ore and turquoise. We also know Khufu sourced special red pigments and other natural colors for the works. This wasn't a single supplier job. It was a web of sources. The most astonishing material is granite. Unlike limestone, it had to come from Aswan. The Nile helps. Water lets you move almost anything, but they still ferried multi-ton blocks 900 kilometers. Granite was used to strengthen interior rooms, burial chambers, and passages, so the pyramid wouldn't crush them. The original entrance sat about 15 meters up, sealed by a stone plug. A passage sloped downward to an unfinished subterranean chamber, perhaps a backup in case the pharaoh died early. Along the way, a branch led upward into the pyramid's core, then splits again. A horizontal corridor reaches the so-called Queen's Chamber, maybe not a queen's at all, possibly a statue niche for one of the king's souls. There they found signs of grave robbers breaking in centuries ago. Above lay the Grand Gallery, a long corbelled hall with an 8-meter vault. Beyond it, the king's chamber, lined in black granite inside, only a bare sarcophagus and granite walls. The entry was blocked by 3 massive granite portcullises, lowered into place by a clever system of ropes and counterweights. The ceiling is supported by 9 granite beams together, weighing about 400 tons, an elaborate load distribution system. The builders miscalculated somewhere. A ceiling beam on the south side is cracked, apparently since construction. Archaeologists found a technical tunnel cut to check the problem during the build. The Giza project was colossal. The whole country's economy pulled the load. In one way or another, nearly everyone was involved. Hauling stone, supplying materials, feeding and clothing workers, keeping accounts. Whole breweries and herds served the site. Herodotus cites 100,000 workers, probably inflated, and he pictured slaves. Modern estimates speak of several thousand skilled crews plus workshops making and repairing tools. Giza today excavates like a city. The pharaoh sometimes lived on site in a temporary palace and ruled from there. It wasn't just the pyramid. There were temples, tombs, for family and top officials, the civil service perk of a deluxe afterlife. The chief architect ensured his own fine tomb nearby. Of course, Egypt has more than the Giza trio. We know of at least 118 pyramids, likely more. Besides the Great Pyramid stand 2 others at Giza, Menkares and Khafre's. Menkares is modest 66 meters, but contains a monolith weighing over 200 tons, a load that daunts many modern engineers. It looked sharp. Besides white limestone, parts were cased in red granite. In the 12th century, a sultan, son of Saladin, ordered it demolished. After 8 months, workers gave up. All they managed was a gouge on one face, and they reported it would take longer to demolish than to build. It's as if ancient builders worked to different standards entirely. In Saqqara stands the step pyramid of Djoser, built in the 27th century BCE, often called Egypt's earliest. It shows how pyramid design evolved. Before Djoser, elites were buried in mastabas, one-story, flat-topped tombs with burial chambers underground. Djoser asked for a mastaba. His architect experimented and stacked them, creating steps. The result impressed visually grand and symbolically a stairway to heaven. We know the architect's name, Imhotep Vizier, sage, astrologer. His career soared so high that a millennium later, Egyptians deified him as a god of wisdom and medicine. Saqqara is a whole necropolis. Pyramids of the 5th and 6th dynasties there bear the earliest pyramid texts. The first found examples of Egyptian funerary and magical literature, ritual descriptions, protective spells, practical afterlife life hacks. The oldest are from the 25th to 24th centuries BCE and later fed into the Book of the Dead. Another famed complex is Dashur, near ancient Memphis. There they first achieved the smooth-sided pyramid form. 11 were built. 5 survive. Among them, the Black Pyramid, not ominous, just sitting on black gravel. Its dark pyramidion is now in the Cairo Museum. There's also the bent pyramid perfectionist, Hell, as if assembled from 2 designs, a broad base with a flattened top. Why? Unclear. Maybe a design flaw forced a mid-course angle change to prevent structural failure. Maybe they hurried because the patron died, though that's unlikely, because the patron was Sneferu, Khufu's father, who left 2 more pyramids. One is the red, or pink, pyramid, third in height after Khufu and Khafra at 109.5 meters. Like those at Giza, it once had white casing, later stripped for medieval construction. Under the casing, the limestone has a rosy tint at sunset, hence the romantic name. Pyramids were even built beyond Egypt. From the 9th to 4th centuries BCE, in what is now Sudan, lay the Meroitic kingdom of Nubians, heavily influenced by Egypt. Modern revisionists, who say the pharaohs were black, have some grounds. These Nubian rulers imitated Egypt and built pyramids. Smaller, though, the largest only 30 meters, but very many, around 2.5. Not all survive. In the 19th century, an Italian archaeologist, really a treasure hunter, Giuseppe Ferlini, tired of digging and dynamited about 40 of them. Conspiracy theories bloom. Europe rediscovered the pyramids surprisingly late. Educated people knew of ancient Egypt and its ruins, but the first accurate images came with Napoleon's savants. By then, the native Egyptians had become Copts. The older culture was forgotten. Arabs had lived there for 1,000 years and didn't much care what the pyramids were. They'd burn papyri to heat ovens. They ground mummies and sold the powder as a panacea. Napoleon brought a real scientific expedition and published a massive report. Egyptology was born in the 19th century. It was a frenetic time esotericism, and occultism were fashion. Freemasonry adopted Egyptian motifs. Scientific traditions were still forming. Many researchers were amateurs or frauds. The notion of preserving monuments wasn't yet settled. Dynamite was common. An occult haze grew around the pyramids, so thick that pyramidology became a term. Numerology was a favorite obsession. In 1859, John Taylor published The Great Pyramid. Why was it built and who built it? He forced the pyramid's proportions to fit the golden ratio and claimed the pyramids were built not by Egyptians, but by Jews, citing the Old Testament. Taylor wasn't a scholar. He was a publisher of minor poets, never visited Egypt, but set a blueprint for pyramidology. His earliest fans were British Israelites, a sect claiming the English descended from a lost tribe of Israel. Their proof, the Egyptian cubit, squinted at properly, approximated the English inch. An American, Charles Taze Russell, founder of the movement known today as Jehovah's Witnesses, argued that God built the pyramid to house the righteous after Judgment Day. Then there was Ignatius Donnelly, American politician, Mason, socialist member of the Noble and Holy Order of the Knights of Labor. His 1881 bestseller, Atlantis. The antediluvian world claimed Atlantis existed, its gods were real, and Egypt was their last colony. With superhuman tech, the Atlanteans built pyramids, not just in Egypt. In the latter 20th century, the craze revived with New Age. In the 1970s, inventor Patrick Flanagan made a model of Giza and claimed pyramids resonated. Followers announced that pyramid replicas slow aging and speed plant growth. With sacred numerology, they predicted World War I, the crucifixion, and Armageddon, everything but the last, retrofitted after the fact. The 19th century mind saw the pyramids as keys to divine writ. Hippies and New Agers cut them free of context and gave them to aliens and time travelers. Erich von Daniken's 1968 Chariots of the Gods popularized ancient astronauts. In his view, the pyramids were beacons for spacefarers. Egyptians couldn't have built them without proper tools, and there's no evidence Egyptians were on site. In reality, we found heaps of tools and entire workers' towns. Still, Daniken is canon for pyramidology and fuels spin-offs like the Orion correlation theory, which claims the three main pyramids and the Sphinx mirror Orion and Leo. The stream of people with tape measures never ends, mostly focused on Khufu's pyramid, meaningful ratios, perfect alignment, and, since Khufu's body wasn't found, mysteries. They say divide this by that. You get P, multiply these, you get the golden ratio. You can try it. It's fun. Or watch Secrets of the Pyramids. The simplest explanation is that Egyptians, like us, loved elegant proportions and pretty numbers. Math and geometry work anywhere, ancient Egypt or the Louvre. To do math, you need ink, something to write on, and a head. Egypt had papyrus, and ink and millennia to think. TikTok didn't exist. We even have mathematical papyri. One, the Moscow Mathematical Papyrus, is in Moscow. The notion that Khufu's pyramid is a giant stone textbook of geometry is beautiful and very Egyptian. A running theme in these theories is modern certainty that earlier people couldn't be as smart as we are. Surely super advanced aliens must have done it, with laser chisels and atomic hammers. We live in a myth of linear progress. Steam engine, car, starship. Or else it already happened with Atlanteans. Complexity equals futurism equals technology in our minds. Alternative purposes for pyramids? 1 million. Professional Egyptologists get about 1 letter a week. Cosmic beacons, vast sundials counting down to civilization's doom, with the Sphinx as the hand. Messages from the past, like the Pioneer plaques. Joseph's biblical granaries, a medieval pilgrim favorite. Fertilizer factories. HQ of intelligent dinosaurs destroyed in a nuclear war. Alien bases. Power plants on unknown principles. Some insist Khufu's pyramid aligns with Inca pyramids. Easter Island, Angkor Wat draw enough lines on a sphere, and you can link anything. A few see an Apache helicopter among the hieroglyphs, though why would Egyptians depict a modern American gunship? Tripods from War of the Worlds would fit better. Egyptologists call pyramidologists pyramidiots. Rude, often fair, but not always. Alternative takes aren't inherently ridiculous. The main counterargument to the funerary view is that archaeologists too readily call unknown things religious. In the 19th century, scholars believed Romans had special household shrines to river nymphs. By century's end, when European cities switched from cesspits to toilets, it dawned on them. Those shrines were indoor latrines with running water. Could pyramids undergo a similar reevaluation? Maybe in the 23rd century we'll smack our foreheads. Ah, so that's what they were. If solid evidence appears, mainstream science won't hide it. Think of the dissertations. But for now, the tomb theory remains the strongest. New data keep coming. In 1993, a tiny robot nicknamed for a path-opening god crawled up ventilation shafts in Khufu's pyramid. Turns out they aren't vents. They reach toward the surface but don't open out. Why? Unknown. The leading idea: symbolic channels for the king's soul to travel. In 2017, a Japanese-French-Egyptian team used muon imaging and found a large void above the Grand Gallery, about 30 by 4 meters. What is it? Debate continues. Even dates float. Egyptian officials set 23 August 2560 BCE as the construction date and celebrate it annually, but other dates are argued. A recently rediscovered wood sample, taken a century ago from the Queen's chamber by a crafty Brit, was radiocarbon dated to between 3341 and 3094 BCE, fueling new opinions. The Book of the Dead says, "I have opened the ways that belong to heaven and those that belong to earth, and none stood up against me there. I have exalted your face, O Lord of eternity." That's the voice of the 24th century BCE, the voice of the 21st CE. On 2nd August 2020, days before Crew Dragon's flight, Elon Musk tweeted, "Aliens built the pyramids over Maishbo. Original. 100%. Then he winked later. Why official versions feel unsatisfying? My view is simple. I'm not a scholar or an archaeologist. I don't know what the pyramids were for, and I'm not ready to call pyramidologists idiots or scholars frauds. But as a regular viewer, I have a question. We're used to stepwise civilization. On medieval Ruses, you learn to build fortifications, Kremlins. In Europe or Asia, you build temples. You keep building, changing, improving. Sometimes architecture declines, then the Renaissance revives it. But you never forget how to build houses or walls. Here, with pyramids, we decided slaves dragged stones, or Freemasons ground them smooth and hoisted them to impossible heights. Modern builders can't do it. We don't know why they did it. And then, nothing. Civilization moved on. Persians came, then Arabs. The pyramids just stand there like any other old thing. Both the slaves did it, and the "it's all religion" lines feel thin. I still think people with bronze chisels and stone polishers couldn't do this. Not with that precision. Even to build a wooden outhouse on your plot, you need some craft and math. Supposedly this civilization lacked that level of knowledge, and yet they built these things. So, for what were the pyramids built, and who built them? I can't answer. But perhaps aliens. Thanks for watching this history class. See you next time.